My name is David Wells. I'm an industry principal in the media and advertising practice at Snowflake. Today's session is break free from Blackbox identity, build a multi-vendor graph that you own. Very provocative topic. We have some distinguished guests here who I'd like to introduce, and then we'll give them some time to introduce themselves as well as their purview. We have Meyer, who is head of AdTech and AI at Hightouch.
Yep.
Bushy, who is the head of product at Narrative.io. Jenny Yurko, who is the VP of Data Product Strategy at WBD. And then Jeremy Flynn, who is the head of product at Horizon Media, largest independent agency in the US. So maybe if we'd be so kind, let's level set with the audience and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into this idea of identity, the role it plays in media and advertising use cases, whether you're talking about activation or measurement. Does that work?
That works.
Let's start with you.
Awesome. Well, I'm Ian. I am AdTech lead at Hightouch, and Hightouch is we are a customer data platform, which basically means that we help people centralize all of their customer data and activate that out in the form of audiences, customer journeys, AI decisioning, sort of dynamic customer experiences. And what's very unique about what we do is we don't actually store any customer data, even though we're a customer data platform. We sit on top of the enterprise's existing data, where it typically lives in a data warehouse like Snowflake, which means that we get instant access to the best source of truth, the best data, and we make it really easy to access it. So the marketers finally have access to all that customer data. And as we'll talk about, identity plays a really important role in all of that, from audience building to activation.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Bushy. I lead the product team at Narrative. Narrative is a data collaboration platform. Our goal in general is to make data easy, and to make data easy for everyone who has to interact with data, from the compliance team to the legal team to the data science team to engineering. And we cover a lot of different kind of industry verticals, but one of the most important that we work alongside the Hightouch team and the Snowflake team on is identity. And like the Hightouch team, our ethos is we want to bring our software, our capabilities, and data from our partners in the data marketplace into your account, into your data plane, into your Snowflake account. And yeah, that's one of the vectors that we're collaborating on.
That's great. Jenny?
Yeah. Jenny Yurko. I lead data product strategy at Warner Brothers Discovery, the house of some really incredible content, maybe the best in the industry. I'm sure we've all watched some HBO content recently. But in data product strategy, what we're doing is really modernizing and improving just our tech and our platforms. We work with anything from clean rooms like Snowflake to working on innovation with composable identity solutions like what we're talking about today.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
The most HBO content I've been watching lately has been Sesame Street, and I'm very sad to see it leaving and going to YouTube. Jeremy Flynn, head of product at Horizon, where I oversee Blue Platform. Blue Platform is a product that we're looking to extend to our marketing partners. It's an AI-native solution that orchestrates the workflow from audience building to activation to measurement. So persistent identity is very important throughout all of that.
That's perfect. And maybe we stay with you a moment. Sure. So historically, agencies have not touched PII. However, they need very strong signal to assemble audiences and then activate or measure outcomes of paid media activations. Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe go a level deeper in terms of Blue, and how important it is to have sort of this super segment that drives insights and audiences to activate as well as measurement?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So as an agency, we are responsible for making a brand's first-party data addressable in media. Mm-hmm. And so what we start with is an identity spine, where we actually onboard a brand's first-party data, enrich that with identity signal and other enrichment sources to understand how we could activate in a media environment that's both online and offline. And being able to orchestrate that from start to finish also means being able to show the impact on brand outcomes, right? And so we take that job very very, very seriously.
Sure.
And one of the things that we have to respect is privacy compliance and how we kind of encrypt and anonymize. But then that kind of plays a role in match rates.
Sure.
And so the idea behind composable identity is how do you maximize match rates for activation purposes.
That's great. That's perfect. And so it warrants mentioning that Blue, the infrastructure of Blue is Snowflake. I have to say it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have me here. But you are able to onboard advertisers directly, through the Snowflake sort of relationship, and then just tap into some of those channels where you want to activate data and then pull in those logs to measure those outcomes. Correct?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
One of the things that we build on top of Snowflake
Sure.
is just our brand's preference.
Sure.
Right. One of the leading capabilities of Blue that we're really proud of is this concept of open ecosystem.
Sure.
Which is we are able to onboard any customer's preferred data sets, right? So if they have an enrichment source or an identity source, that's where we work in deep partnership with folks like Snowflake, like Narrative, to quickly understand the impact to our brand's goals, audience building, measurement.
Okay, that's great. So let's take another perspective, look at it from the publisher perspective. Obviously, you have an ad-supported platform. You work with a ton of marketers. You need to get that scale of activation and target relevant audiences. You have your own identity spine. It's possible that you enrich that to actually drive more data-driven activation, and then you have to measure the outcomes of that campaign. Can you speak to that a little bit and the importance of having that addressability and how you're approaching that today?
Yes, there's so many factors from the publisher perspective that we have to take into consideration. Mm-hmm. Consumers are giving us their data and enabling us to utilize that for advertising purposes. Sure. And we have to be really good about how we treat that data. So all of the data sources that we have, like HBO, or we have CNN data, Bleacher Report, all of the consumers go to those different platforms in different ways, and different types of consents are applied. From an identity perspective, that makes things difficult because combining those data sets is a difficult task. Sure. There's not the same identity that comes from a CNN versus a Bleacher Report. But the composable solution, like what Narrative has to offer, enables us to anonymize that identity and work with that PII in a VPPA compliant fashion. Mm-hmm. So really what we're looking at is how do we federate this identity
Sure.
in a way that enables us to be as interoperable as our advertisers want us to be. So if you want us to work with different companies, we can translate that into any type of identity that works
Sure.
in your environment.
Okay.
But really, consent frameworks are very important to us.
That's wonderful. And then that graph, that identity stitch that's powering that scale of activation, or as well as that accuracy of measurement, you're putting that in a Snowflake data clean room so that when you're joining a marketer's data set against your subscriber universe to power activation, there is protection there where none of the data is exposed, but you get a very scalable match rate. You can run that campaign and then pull in the impression logs to measure the outcomes. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think it's the ease of doing all of
Sure.
that with the tech that Snowflake has.
Okay.
Being able to install an app, like a native app, enables us to really take down the man hours that we're working with our tech teams and have things really move as swift as we need to.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Bushy, so let's talk about composable identity. So it seems like the descriptor of composable is on a lot of things these days. We know that people have done some identity stitching to this point to power things like addressability as well as measurement. But what is new about Narrative's offering, specifically on Snowflake, and how are you iterating when you're talking to either an agency, a publisher, any manner of ad platform that needs identity to power activation as well as measurement?
Sure, yeah. For us, composability, I think, is all about optionality.
Sure.
It's optionality on multiple vectors. So first of all, it's where is the data, where does the data live? Mm-hmm. It's are you composing identity from first-party data sources? Are you composing it all from third-party data sources? Is it going to be a mix?
Sure.
It's do you want to use off-the-shelf algorithms for building that identity? Do you have a data science team that has their own definition of identity or some part of identity that they want to come in and bring in? And it's also, how do you want to work with third-party providers? Do you want to work with one provider? Do you want to work with multiple? How are you going to get those agreements signed? And so for us, it's all about being able to execute that on any vector that you want to work on.
Sure.
It's also about who do you want to work with to help slice and dice that identity into meaningful audiences. Where do you want to deliver that data? So that optionality is really what makes it composable for us. It's the ability to, first of all, bring that software into your Snowflake account, bring data sets from multiple providers into your Snowflake account, allow you to mix and match the way that you want, allow you to test that data to understand what the value of that data is going to be before you sign an agreement with those providers, and then integrate it seamlessly.
Okay, that's great. So whether I'm an agency, a publisher, a media network, I may have some first-party data or no data at all. I can use this narrative native application on Snowflake. If I have gaps in my graph, I can actually plug it, and I can curate those linkages through multiple identity linkage partners, best of breed, to have a more robust graph to power my ad platform, or if I'm a marketer, even to power my holistic view of a customer.
Absolutely, you've got it. And you can even have multiple versions of that graph. That's another vector of composability.
Sure.
You might have a version of the graph that works well for your marketing team that is all about addressability.
Sure.
And you might have another version of that graph that you want to work with your compliance team, or that's going to be about identifying fraud. And you can kind of transit up and down those different versions of the graph with different rules for what composes identity or what makes up an identity connection.
Okay.
And have them all live within your Snowflake account at the same time.
Okay, so when you're sourcing these identity linkages, you can look at the different metadata points on those linkage providers and sort of stipulate, hey, provider X is maybe a little stronger in this area based on the recency of the graph, how often they're delivering it, the price point. But then you can also stitch together other identity providers. You can do that ultimately to get this highly scalable super graph that's going to power your ad platform.
Sure. Yeah, those are all signals that you can use as you're constructing your own version of what is identity and what is identity for the use case that I need it to use right now. Okay,
and in some cases, you're also enriching just the graph linkages keyed at an individual or a household with things like demographics and other inputs that can, say, power, a segment activation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. We need to give you a chance to talk. So listen, Hightouch is on a tear. We have a very powerful relationship. You're no stranger to identity. Obviously, you do first-party identity stitching as part of your cloud-native CDP. You also, I think, have probabilistic identity matching. That said, you've also struck up a partnership with Narrative. Talk to the audience a little bit about the need of a third-party identity provider or the ability to create a super graph and the value of Hightouch and your cloud-native CDP on top of that to sort of assemble audiences and then activate downstream, if you would.
Yeah. So we've spent most of our time as a company really focused on first-party data, but we're working with a lot of our customers. It's become really clear that third-party identity data plays a really important role. So I'll give a really specific example around retail customer. So if I'm a retailer, I am probably running a lot of my sales through in-store transactions. I've probably started to built out a loyalty program, in large part so that I can actually identify the people who are purchasing. I have the data on those purchases, and I can use that to personalize experiences, to run targeted ad programs, to build out my retail media network. The problem is, let's say for my in-store transactions, only 50% of those actually have a loyalty program attached to it. Let's say they enter their phone number at the till when they're checking out. That means that 50% of those purchases aren't attached to a known person. And when I'm, let's say, running a cross-sell campaign against someone who, people who bought a gluten-free product and I want to promote other gluten-free products, well, I'm probably missing a broad swath of those people if I can't actually resolve them back to some person who I want to send an email to or who I want to target with ads. So we think about that as third-party identity resolution. The second is I really want to run more personalized ads. So I want to know more about that person. And I may collect some information in the user experience, but there's a lot of information that I probably don't collect that could be really useful for personalization, like demographics. Maybe I want to know more about the household itself because purchases at a retailer at a grocery store happen at the household level. And so that's when we need third-party data enrichment, right? We need to add those additional attributes about that person, about that household to personalize the experience better, get better performance out of my marketing. The third is, as an advertiser and as someone maybe monetizing my audiences, I want to increase the addressability, which means I want to increase the reach of my audiences. Because if I'm selling this thing on a CPM basis, right, I can make more from that monetization effort if I can reach more people, right? And the people who are buying ads against those audiences can reach and drive more performance. So that addressability thing becomes really important. And a really great way to do that is when you're building your own identity graph to bring in those incremental identifiers that are going to help me when I'm sending that audience data to an ad platform to, maybe I have the phone number, but I don't have the email address. So now I can enrich those data sets with additional identifiers to increase the match rate, increase my reach, and increase my ability to monetize and drive performance. So obviously a lot of really good reasons to bring in third-party data, which is exactly why we struck up this partnership. I think the last thing I'd say is what we found in doing all of this is what has become really important to us and to Narrative and to Snowflake is we have this really deep philosophical approach where we think that your data should be owned by you, that your identity should be owned by you in the place it already exists, which would be in your data warehouse. And so we're really on this mission to make it so that you can build your own identity graph by bringing in these third-party providers, but without getting locked into a single provider, without having to push it into another platform where now they kind of own your identity. So you own this identity, and you can activate against all of these different identity resolution, data enrichment, and addressability use cases.
That's super powerful. So listen, as I said, you're sort of on a tear as a technology and a partner at Snowflake. While you sort of rose to prominence around marketers putting utilizing you to activate their customer data, there's also a lot of opportunity, at least as we've spoken, about media networks actually monetizing their data and doing off-site activation. Part of the value of what you're doing is not just the activation of the pipes to get into the destination where that ad is served, but it's also the orchestration. So maybe I want to start with David on one channel, and maybe he takes an action, looks at a product, puts it in his cart, but closes out of that window. But then you can put in rules and logic to politely retarget him on another high-impact channel, say WBD, and then drive him to complete that action. Can you talk a little bit about orchestration and the importance of identity to power that?
Yeah. So let's say in the context of this media network, I'm thinking about two things. One is personalization from the perspective of the advertiser, and two is really monetization from the perspective of the person monetizing the audiences. Orchestration orchestration is the way of personalizing. So what we do with Narrative and with Snowflake is, let's say you've built your identity graph in Snowflake, right? Bringing in these multiple providers that Narrative is helping us stitch this graph together is we're actually, I told you we're a CDP, we're a composable CDP. We use that word as well because we sit just directly on top of that identity graph that you've built out in Snowflake. And what that means is now I have direct access to all of this data so that I can build that really personalized audience so that when the advertiser comes to me and it says, I want to run this really bespoke, specific campaign, I can do that. And basically what we do is we're the user interface on top of it that a non-technical person can use. So you don't need to make an IT request. You just log into this UI and you click a few buttons to create your audience logic. And then we just access all of that data that you've built out in that identity graph, and we send it out to the ad platforms for off-site targeting. We send it to your ad server for on-site targeting, so that, again, your advertisers get the personalization that they want, which means performance for them, and the ad sellers get the monetization they want through higher reach and probably higher CPMs as well, right? Because you're creating these more sort of advanced and more personalized audiences for them.
That's great. Mr. Bushy, we're going to skip over you a second. I want to get Jenny and Jeremy an opportunity to talk. So Jenny, I mean, this is all a very novel concept. It seems like DCRs were new, and then, using native applications to do resolution around joins to power activation and measurement was very new. And now we're talking about composable identity. I mean, talk to us a little bit about using the idea of a federation of identity to power those applications, and how hard was that, like that journey as you started within your organization to sort of address that idea from just an idea to actually getting on board with it?
Yeah, I think it really started with a lot of demand from different partners. So having to create many and many connections for every different use case. When I need an Epsilon Core ID to work with Publicis company, when I need a Luid ID in order to work with VideoAmp, and then I need TU IDs as well. Having one centralized place that's so easy to install, the composability of it, allows me to move quickly and build those connections with any and all scenarios. So instead of having to spend a year building one connection, I can have 100 connections right away. And the flexibility of being able to move from one ID to another, fill the gaps with, dare I say, AI-powered tools, really enable us to build householding, device level, and optionality for our advertisers. So
that's great. So you're not beholden to any given identity provider. You can actually work with all of them. You have this master graph where, let's say, a marketer wants to do joins across your DCR to power activation. They can bring their own identity. You can do that join, and then you can, basically get those IDs onboarded into your platform. It's
a surprisingly amazing silver bullet solution to a really complex problem that we all have.
That's great. Mr. Flynn, so, Horizon is no stranger to this idea of sort of identity stitching, right? I feel like you were pioneers with HMI Blue that started several years ago. And now you have this like massive super segment that allows all manner of use case, like you said, insights with first party data, segment creation, activation, measurement. Now there's AI, right? So you have that anonymized super segment. You can provide, just more granular insight. And this is a hard question to address because the future of AI is yet writ. Talk to us about how that super segment, that identity stitch, and AI on top of it is going to unlock value for you and then the marketers that work with you.
Yeah, well, the answer to that is the marketers directly.
Right.
Because they'll have access to the product that we are building. They do have access to it. So Blue has been in market for 6 years. Blue Platform has been in market for a year. So I'll break up your question into two parts.
Sure.
The way that we're thinking about data is like data as an experience, and AI as an experience, and data as a platform. And I think that there's implications of leveraging AI in both of those use cases.
Sure.
So in terms of AI for platform, it's how do we do exactly what we've been talking about. We have identity spine, we want to enrich it, we want to understand signal, right? So if we've got a retail customer, 80% of transactions still happen offline. So how do we actually append to identity location data to verify a visit or a transaction to understand that that user actually bought something offline? Then there's the experience component, which is how do we actually enable the marketer to build those segments like directly themselves and actually interrogate the definition of an audience. And so we see AI playing a role in both. The first is how we actually do the organization of that data below the iceberg, right? So how do we actually match and append identity to third-party enrichment? But then how do we simplify the experience kind of above water to our marketer and say, hey, you build a definition of an audience. We're going to give you an AI native tool in your hand to build that audience and actually see what the sources are. How is this audience comprised? And that's like actually shaking up traditionally how audiences get bought and activated. We go to a buying media platform, you select the audience from the catalog, you activate that audience. we're now giving the marketer the ability to do that. So now definition could be persistent throughout the entire campaign lifecycle. That has huge implications for measurement. It's got huge implications for optimization, and will have implications for creative at some point. And so that's what we're really trying to accomplish with Blue.
That's amazing. So how is that audience creation, like if you go a level deeper, how is that rendered? Is that a dash where they're dragging and dropping? Is it a chatbot? Like, and it could start as one and sort of evolve into another.
So we're building the UI like dual track.
Sure.
So we want to offer like a natural language ability to like build an audience, but you have to be really good at prompt engineering. So when we give folks like access to the platform, we try to train them. But on the right-hand side, you have the ability to see like how your prompt is affecting like what the audience is.
Sure.
In addition to after that audience is being built, well, before it even gets built, it gives you the definition of what they are going to move forward with and tells you the sources of all the different data sources that we can work with for like what is going to build that audience, and then you're actually able to build it. And then you're actually able to carry that into activation. And so like we try to bring transparency or the breadcrumbs into each step of that process, but also trying to keep it like super simple.
Sure.
So this way our end user has like a delightful experience.
Yeah, we talk about that topic. The natural language is talking to your data, right?
Yeah.
So someone who's non-technical like myself, I'm not writing code. I can actually just input a prompt through natural language, and that can get rendered. I can have an outcome rendered from that, whether it's an audience or something of that nature.
100%. I think the goal we're trying to solve for is operational efficiency.
Sure.
Rather than sending an email to a data scientist,
Right.
waiting 2 weeks for them to come back with
That's right.
SQL code that comprises the audience, now you could just send that SQL code to your data scientist.
That's right.
Does this check out?
And where do we think, I mean, what's great about what you described is that like the code actually lives alongside it, so they know what that natural language, it's getting translated to, let's say, a SQL query that renders the output or the audience, and then that can get onboarded directly into a destination. How much of that, and it's hard to say, right? How much of that turns into just chat interface where all of a sudden it's unlocking all the use cases that you might ever want?
Well, if you're Meta,
Right.
and you say a year from now everything
Sure.
is going to be a chat box, and you're the traditional way of doing audience planning where it's like step by step, like we think we need to land somewhere in the middle,
Right.
because we want to meet our users where they are with the product. And so yeah, I see a future where that goes, but the first step is building efficacy towards what AI is like delivering, and that's why not only before we activate an audience, we give folks the ability to interrogate audience insights and actually build models off of that initial seed audience, lookalike models, LTV models, right? So we want to bring people like every step along that way to get them to trust the data to eventually start to scale
Right.
back
That's
user
great.
experience.
Mr. Bushy, we'll give you the last word. You've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Say something very wise. No, so like you have listen, we've had a partnership with you for, I think it seems like over 2 years now. You've stood up a native application. We're moving forward with this composable identity solution. We have partners that are using it. What's the next frontier, right? You're using AI today in Rosetta Stone, which is doing sort of the normalization and then the stitching, and you can actually curate your own supergraph. But what is next?
So Jeremy was just talking about this idea of natural language turning into a SQL query. And there's a real great affinity between AI and SQL because the LLM, it speaks SQL by default.
Sure.
One of the interesting things that you have to account for there, though, is a common understanding of the context behind the data, understanding what the data actually means.
Semantic layer, if you will.
The semantic layer. It's just a table in your Snowflake account, and it's there's a column called gender, but what does that mean? What's inside of it?
Right.
So something that Narrative has been working on for a very long time is this idea of a Rosetta Stone, a layer that can allow data from multiple different disparate sources, whether that's a bunch of different first-party data sources or third-party data sources, to all speak the same language.
Sure.
And so being able to take that data and turn it into something that the LLM is not only going to be able to query with SQL, but also understand the meaning behind and have a consistent meaning behind, I think is going to be really important for a lot of different use cases in the future. Things that we can't even imagine right now.
Right.
I think it's going to rely a lot on that idea of a semantic layer. And so that's something that we've been building with AI and more traditional machine learning models at scale inside of Snowflake and coordinating with the Horizon team around.
So in other words, you could stand up this super graph, you could put an incredibly powerful piece of technology like Hightouch on top of it, create audiences, create journeys across multiple channels, but also you may stand up, a chatbot that uses an LLM all within your security perimeter on Snowflake, and you can do what Mr. Flynn was talking about, which is, hey, create me an audience of XYZ, and then activate it across these various destinations.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that sounds pretty smart. Anyway, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful panel. You guys are terrific. I feel like, the least intelligent of the group. You guys have had wonderful vision on where data and identity is going. Thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would be so kind, give these fine people a round of applause, and we'll let you get to the bar.